Hi, class, and welcome to the presentation for Chapter 4, Human Digestion, Absorption, and Transport. This is part 1 because I'm breaking this down into two separate presentations just so that they are more manageable for you to watch. So in this presentation, we'll take a look at the major components of the digestive system and the functions of each. We'll define prebiotics and probiotics and the roles of each, and then I'll briefly discuss two common inflammatory bowel conditions, and there are many digestive system diseases and disorders, but I'll leave the additional ones in the text for you to read about. Okay, so every day we eat a variety of foods, but it's not the food itself that powers your metabolic activities in your body, it's the nutrients in that food. So, how does our body transform something like a turkey sandwich, a veggie burger, or maybe even a fruit smoothie into something our body can actually use? Well, it all starts with ingestion of the food through your mouth, which is the entry point into the digestive system. And then it goes through digestion beginning in the mouth and continuing through the GI tract, involving the breakdown of large food molecules into nutrients that we can use. And after digestion, absorption takes place, which is the uptake and removal of nutrients from the digestive or gastrointestinal tract to the rest of the body for growth, maintenance, reproduction, and repair, and continuous renewal of cells, tissues, and organs. After digestion and absorption, anything that's left that's not usable by the body is excreted in the form of feces. So this is figure 4.1 from your textbook, and it's shown on this slide. It shows the major organs associated with the digestive system. And what I want you to remember is that there are organs of digestion, and then there are those organs considered accessories to digestion. We'll look at those on the next slide. And the major organs of digestion are the mouth, the esophagus, which is a muscular tube leading to the stomach, then the stomach itself, the small intestine, and the large intestine. It takes food about 24 to 72 hours, depending on the type that it is, to pass through completely through your body. We'll talk about this in a subsequent chapter, but you'll learn that fatty foods, for instance, take longer to break down than those that are mostly comprised of carbohydrate or protein. So again, some things take longer than others to digest. Um, it is important to understand the structure of the walls of the GI tract. The inside space of the GI tract is called the lumen, which is the hollow space through which food and liquids pass. Now, the lumen is lined with a layer of mucosal cells called the mucosa, since they do secrete mucus. These mucosal cells allow our bodies to absorb nutrients so they can be transported to where they're needed by the blood and lymph. The stomach has the thickest and strongest muscles of the GI tract. They have to be strong since they churn food, liquids, and gastric juices within the lumen, in addition to moving the material on through the digestive tract. Okay, this slide shows the accessory organs. These are the ones that assist throughout the digestive process. They are the salivary glands, the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. Now, they all secrete fluids containing a variety of agents such as enzymes and acids, which aid in digestion. But unlike the organs of the GI tract, these don't actually come in contact with food. They just secrete substances to help break it down. We'll talk more about the roles of these organs a few slides from now. Now, digestion is comprised of two main processes, mechanical and chemical digestion. They work together by breaking down the nutrients in food to manageable pieces to be processed by our bodies. Now, mechanical digestion is like it sounds. It's the physical fragmentation of food that begins in the mouth when you start to chew your food. Some mechanical digestion also happens in the stomach, since the muscles of the stomach forcefully churn food, which disperses the smaller food pieces and exposes large molecules to the digestive fluids that will ultimately break them apart. Now, oftentimes, mechanical digestion is all that is needed to release many vitamins and minerals from foods that can then be taken up by mucosal cells of the small intestine. Now, chemical digestion breaks the chemical bonds to break large molecules into smaller ones. This is done through the action of enzymes in the mouth, stomach, and small intestine, and through the action of stomach acid as well. So now that we know the object of digestion, that the object is to break food into smaller, usable components, let's take a look at the digestion of a very common food, which is a hamburger, from start to finish. So the first stop is the mouth, where a bit of the burger is chewed. Okay, so as it's chewed, it's mixed with saliva in the mouth that contains the enzymes amylase, which begins to break down carbohydrate in the bun, and lipase, which begins to break down fat in the meat. All the while, your tongue is helping to mix the food with your saliva and is helping to push it toward the back of your mouth for swallowing. So, next, the food bolus, which is the softened lump of food just swallowed, enters your esophagus. Now, through the actions of peristalsis and gravity, the bolus makes its way to the entrance of the stomach. Now, before it can go into the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter must relax to allow food to enter the stomach, and it usually stays closed to keep the contents of the stomach from moving back into the esophagus. Now, as the bolus enters the stomach, where gastric juices that contain hydrochloric acid mixes with food, they begin to unfold the protein in the hamburger through chemical digestion. The gastric juices also contain, and I have this on the slide here, proteases and lipases, which continue to digest proteins and fats respectively in the food. And again, the muscles of the stomach churn the hamburger bolus into fragments that, excuse me, disperse the gastric fluid. Now, the resulting thick liquid is called chyme, which at this point will continue on through the digestive process. So now that the food and digestive juices are mixed together into chyme, it will pass through the pyloric sphincter at the junction of the stomach and small intestine. It does this just a few teaspoons at a time. Now, the small intestine, and keep this in mind, is the primary site for digestion and absorption of nutrients. The small intestine has three sections. You'll hear this pronounced in a couple different ways, but you can either call it the duodenum or the duodenum, or the first portion, the jejunum, which is the middle part, and the ileum, which is the last and the longest part of the small intestine. And in its entirety, the small intestine is about 20 feet long. Now, the inside of your small intestine is covered in villi and microvilli that increase the surface area for absorption. Now, something else interesting happens in the small intestine. Since the chyme that enters from the stomach is very acidic, it has to be neutralized. Otherwise, the chyme would denature the digestive enzymes. Now, our bodies have an ingenious way to handle that via the pancreas, which releases a bicarbonate containing pancreatic juice that neutralizes the gastric juices in the chyme. The pancreatic juice also contains lipases, proteases, and amylases to break down larger fat, protein, and carb molecules from the hamburger. At the same time, bile that is produced in the liver but stored in the gallbladder is released for critical lipid digestion. Okay, now water and small amounts of nutrients can enter the mucosal cells lining the GI tract directly through simple diffusion. And there's a diagram of this in your chapter, where molecules move freely across the cell membrane from areas of higher to areas of lower concentration. Now, some other nutrients enter through facilitated diffusion, which requires a carrier protein to take the nutrient through the cell membrane, while the entry of even other nutrients to cells depends on active transport, which requires not only a carrier protein but energy to get them across the membrane. Once inside the cells of the brush border of the small intestine, the circulatory system, which includes the blood and lymphatic systems, can carry vital nutrients to tissues and organs. Now, anything that's left in the chyme at this point that remains undigested moves into your large intestine, which is made up of the cecum, colon, and rectum. There are no villi in the large intestine like there is in the small intestine, and very little digestion and absorption occurs here. However, your large intestine does extract electrolytes, some fatty acids, certain vitamins, and water prior to excreting everything else as feces. The large intestine is the home of over 1,000 species of bacteria that feed on undigested fiber and starch. This is important since the human body has no enzymes to digest dietary fiber. These bacteria produce gas and short chain fatty acids and also prevent disease by decreasing the activity of bacteria that may cause disease. And once everything that can be digested and absorbed has been at this point, it's all excreted as feces through the rectum and anus. Okay, now throughout the process of digestion, certain hormones play a vital role in signaling when events should happen. And you need to keep these three in mind. For instance, the gastrin hormone signals G cells in the stomach to release hydrogen and chloride ions to come together to form hydrochloric acid. Another hormone, secretin, stimulates the pancreas and liver to release the bicarbonate solution that mixes with chyme to raise its pH. Finally, the hormone cholecystokinin, or CCK, stimulates the gallbladder to release bile into the duodenum. Now, remember that bile is vital for fat digestion and absorption. And again, to keep these presentations to a manageable length, I am presenting a separate PowerPoint that covers the rest of Chapter 4. If you have any questions on the basics of digestion or the organs of digestion, please contact me.